Welcome back, everybody, to the deep dive. Today, we're going to be taking a look at logo design
Okay,
and
sure.
branding. And the book that we're using for this deep dive is Logo Design Love by David Airy.
Cool.
And we're going to kind of go through this and explore kind of what makes an iconic logo. How do you design a logo that really sticks with people?
Hmm.
And how do you make sure that yours is one of the ones that people remember? Because we're bombarded with logos every single day.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And Airy, he actually points out that the average American sees like 16,000
Wow.
ads, logos, and labels every day, and he did this little experiment where he spent just 33 minutes of his morning routine,
Okay.
just taking a picture, photographing every logo he saw, and he ended up with 33 photos.
So like a logo a minute.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
that's a lot.
So, it's not just about creating a pretty design. It's about really making an impact,
Yeah,
cutting through all that noise, right?
it really is, and that's where this idea of brand equity comes in.
Yeah.
You think about logos like Apple, McDonald's, Nike. They're not just symbols. They
Yeah.
represent
Right.
feelings,
Yeah.
experiences, even entire lifestyles.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
like that feeling you get when you see it. It's like,
Exactly.
oh,
It's that power that a well-designed logo can have.
yeah, for sure. So how do we get there? How do we create something with that much impact? Airy breaks down what he considers the 7 key elements of iconic design.
Okay.
Um, should we start with simplicity?
Sure.
I mean, the FedEx logo with the hidden arrow,
Right.
brilliant, but so simple.
Yeah, it's a great example of how simplicity can actually make a logo more memorable. Our brains love to find patterns and meaning, and so a simple design is just easier to process
Right.
and recall. And plus, think about how that FedEx logo works on everything, from a delivery truck to a tiny packaged label.
Oh, yeah, that's true.
Simplicity makes it incredibly versatile.
And that ties into like adaptability too. But I guess before we jump ahead to that, sticking with simplicity, is there a risk of oversimplifying? Like, how do you make sure that a simple logo still has meaning and depth?
That's where the research comes in.
Yeah.
You have to really understand the brand,
Okay.
its values, its audience.
Yeah.
A simple logo for a tech startup might look very different from a simple logo for a handmade jewelry company,
Right.
right? So it's about finding that sweet spot where simplicity meets meaning.
So it's not just about stripping away details. It's about like distilling the essence of the brand
Exactly.
into its purest form.
And that brings us to another key element, relevance.
Okay.
A logo needs to resonate with its target audience and make sense for the industry that it represents.
Mm-hmm.
Airy gives the example of Clive's. It's a bakery.
Okay.
With a logo that uses like a playful hand-drawn font, it feels friendly, approachable,
Right.
and perfectly suited to a business focused on homemade organic goods.
Yeah, I can see that. So, okay, I'm starting to see how all these elements kind of work together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we got simple, we got relevant, helps us cut through this clutter. But how do we make sure it stands the test of time? I feel like trends come and go so quickly, especially in the design world.
That's where Airy brings up tradition.
Okay.
He argues that incorporating elements of tradition into a logo can help it avoid looking dated in a few years. So look at Vanderbilt University's logo.
Hmm.
The oak leaf has been a symbol of strength and endurance for centuries. And it's been part of their identity for decades.
Right.
It feels timeless.
Timeless, not trendy.
Not trendy, exactly. And that helps with memorability, another crucial element. Think about the New Bedford Whaling Museum logo, for example.
Okay.
It combines a whale's tail with the sails of a ship, immediately creating a
It
visual.
tells a story.
It does. It tells a story. It's relevant to the museum's focus.
Yeah.
And unforgettable.
Yeah, and I'm also thinking about like the NHS logo with its bold shape and use of negative space.
Yes.
It's instantly recognizable, even in silhouette. That's
Mhm.
distinction, right?
Yeah.
Distinction. It's about creating a design that stands out from the crowd and can be identified even at a small scale or from a distance. And, that ability to reduce a logo to its simplest form is also a great test of its overall strength.
Okay, so we've got simplicity, relevance, tradition, distinction, memorability. Are we missing any?
There's one more single focus.
Okay.
Airy argues that the most iconic logos highlight one key element for maximum impact.
Hmm.
He uses the French property exhibition logo as an example.
Okay.
It combines the French flag with an open door, clearly communicating both the location and the purpose of the exhibition.
Okay.
There's no ambiguity, just a powerful focus message.
So we got our 7 elements of iconic design, but how do we actually put these into practice? So let's shift gears a little bit and dive into the design process itself.
Right. Well, Airy, he emphasizes that the design process starts long before you ever put pen to paper.
Okay.
It begins with research, and I mean really digging deep to understand the client, their competition, the market they operate in. He uses Landor's work on the FedEx rebrand as a case study,
Okay.
and they discovered through research that people were already shortening Federal Express to FedEx
Yeah.
in everyday conversation,
Right.
which led them to that iconic logo we know today.
So they tapped into something that already existed organically. Like it makes you wonder what other gems are hiding in plain sight, just waiting to be discovered
Right.
through thorough research.
Exactly. And once you've gathered all that information, it's time to create the design brief.
Okay.
Aries stresses how important this is for staying aligned with the client's goals and avoiding that dreaded design by committee trap.
Oh, design by committee.
Uh,
Shudder.
Well, it doesn't have to be a nightmare. Aries actually offers some strategies for navigating committees a little bit later on.
Okay.
But for now, let's focus on the brief. He uses Maggie McNabb's work on the Heart Hospital of New Mexico logo as a fantastic example of how a well-crafted brief can lead to a truly meaningful design.
Tell me more about that one.
So the client wanted to incorporate the Zia sun symbol, which is sacred to the Zia Pueblo people.
Okay.
McNabb recognized the cultural significance of the symbol and went above and beyond to ensure its respectful use. She encouraged the hospital to seek permission from the Zia Pueblo elders and even incorporated the palm of a hand in a heart shape into the design, symbolizing both the hospital's location and the compassionate care it offers.
Wow. So it's not just about aesthetics, it's about respecting the meaning and the history behind the symbols that you use.
Absolutely. And once you have a solid brief,
Yeah.
it's time to start brainstorming.
Okay.
Airy is a big advocate for mind mapping, which is basically taking all those words and ideas from the brief
Yeah.
and turning them into visual connections.
It's like a visual representation of your thought process.
Exactly. He shows us the mind map he created for Meadows Renewable, a company selling solar energy products.
Okay.
And he starts with the central concept of sun and branches out to connect words like energy growth, sustainability, linking those concepts to potential visual representations.
I love how mind mapping can help you explore like different avenues and make those unexpected connections.
It's like giving your creativity a jump start.
Yeah.
And from there, Airy encourages designers to embrace the power of sketching.
Okay.
He believes that pen and paper allow for a freedom and fluidity that you sometimes lose when you jump straight into design software.
I can see that. There's something about that tactile experience of sketching that just unlocks a different part of your brain.
He uses Studio 1500's Elemental 8 logo as an example. That logo, which is a simple yet brilliant combination of two circles, was born from a quick sketch, proving that sometimes the best ideas come from those spontaneous bursts of inspiration.
It's a good reminder to not overthink it.
Right.
You allow yourself to play and explore without judgment.
And then once you've explored those ideas, refined your sketches,
Yeah.
and landed on a design you love, it's time to present it to the client.
Okay.
This is where your communication skills are just as important as your design skills.
Right, because you have to showcase your work effectively, but also persuade the client that your design is the right solution for their brand.
Airy highlights 160/90's presentation for the Woodmere Art Museum logo, where they chose to initially present the logo in black and white, to focus on the core concept before introducing color.
Interesting.
It's a subtle but effective way to guide the client's attention and help them appreciate the design's underlying structure and meaning.
It's like setting the stage and then revealing the full performance. Speaking of revealing, let's talk about the elephant in the room.
Okay.
Logo redesigns. It feels like every brand is going through a redesign these days, some more successfully than others.
It's a tricky balance. You have to refresh the brand without alienating loyal customers or losing that hard-earned brand equity.
Right.
Airy offers some cautionary tales like the infamous Tropicana redesign.
Oh, yeah.
Remember that one? They ditched the familiar orange with a straw image and replaced it with a generic-looking glass of orange juice.
It was a disaster.
Sales plummeted. Consumers felt like the brand had lost its soul.
They completely underestimated the emotional connection that people had with that iconic imagery.
And what other redesign fails did Airy highlight? Well, you can't talk about redesign fails without mentioning New Coke.
Oh, right.
Coca-Cola thought they could improve on a classic, but customers revolted. It just shows the power of nostalgia and the importance of understanding what makes a brand truly resonate with its audience.
So how do you avoid those pitfalls? Are there any examples of redesigns that actually worked?
Of course, AIII balances those cautionary tales
Hmm.
with examples of successful rebrands.
Okay.
Take CNA, for instance. Through research, they discovered that customers saw them as bureaucratic and unresponsive.
Okay.
To combat that perception, they redesigned their logo, introducing the Tree of Life and the slogan, "A Business of Caring,"
Hmm.
to symbolize growth, connection, and a renewed commitment to their customers.
So they use the redesign to shift public perception
Yeah.
and communicate a new set of values. Did
Exactly.
it work?
Absolutely. They successfully repositioned themselves in the market and saw a significant improvement in customer satisfaction.
Wow.
Another example AIII highlights is JCJ Architecture's logo refresh.
Okay.
They updated their typeface to give the brand a more modern feel,
Hmm.
while retaining the core elements that made their logo recognizable.
So it's like a subtle facelift. You look refreshed and revitalized without losing your essential identity.
That's a great analogy.
Mm.
And it brings us to another challenge that many designers face, one that can be just as daunting as a major rebrand: working with committees.
Oh, yes, back to the dreaded design by committee scenario. How does Ari suggest we navigate those treacherous waters?
He actually offers some surprisingly practical advice.
Okay.
He starts by encouraging designers to reframe their thinking. Instead of viewing the committee as an adversary, see them as a partner.
Okay.
Their input, while sometimes frustrating, can actually strengthen the final design.
So it's about collaboration, not combat.
Exactly. And it's about setting clear expectations from the outset. AIII emphasizes the importance of defining roles, establishing a clear decision-making process, and ensuring that everyone understands the goals of the project.
So if everyone's on the same page from the beginning, there's less room for miscommunication and those frustrating, too many cooks in the kitchen situations.
He also encourages designers to use the committee's diverse perspectives to their advantage.
Okay.
Instead of seeing their input as a threat to your creative vision, view it as an opportunity to refine your ideas and make sure the design resonates with a wider audience.
So it's about finding that sweet spot between staying true to your vision and being open to feedback.
He even shares personal anecdotes about his own experiences with committees. For example, he talks about a project for Berthier Associates, where the committee's suggestions actually improved the final logo.
Wow. So sometimes it's about letting go of your ego and recognizing that a collaborative approach can lead to a better outcome.
And sometimes it's about standing your ground. He also talks about a project for the Yellow Pages, where he had to politely but firmly advocate for his design vision against some committee suggestions that he felt would weaken the overall concept.
So it's about picking your battles and knowing when to push back.
But at the end of the day, it all comes back to communication, right? Being able to articulate your ideas, clearly explain your rationale, and persuade the client that your design is the best solution.
And those communication skills aren't just essential for working with clients and committees. They're also crucial for navigating the emotional ups and downs of a creative career.
I was just thinking about that. The design world is so competitive, and it's easy to get discouraged, especially when you're facing rejection or creative blocks. How does AIII address that aspect of the design journey?
Yeah, it can be a real roller coaster ride. You pour your heart and soul into a design, and sometimes it's met with crickets, other times it takes off like a rocket.
It really is, and AIII, he acknowledges those challenges and offers some fantastic strategies for staying motivated and maintaining that creative fire.
Okay.
One thing he emphasizes is the importance of continuous learning.
So it's about like staying hungry, always looking for new sources of inspiration, new techniques to master.
Exactly, and it's not just about consuming information. It's about actively experimenting, pushing yourself outside of your comfort zone, trying new things.
Okay.
AIII also talks about the importance of stepping away from the screen, getting back to those traditional tools like sketching.
Oh, yeah, there's something so freeing about putting pen to paper. Isn't there like no pressure to be perfect, just pure creative flow?
It's a great way to de-stress, to reconnect with that playful, intuitive part of yourself. And it can lead to some unexpected breakthroughs. Remember, the IIII logo was born from a simple sketch.
Yeah, that's a good reminder to not underestimate the power of those analog tools. Sometimes the best ideas come when you're least expecting them.
And speaking of unexpected breakthroughs, AIII talks about the importance of personal growth and reflection.
Okay.
He encourages designers to view their careers as a journey of continuous improvement, to embrace those challenges and setbacks as opportunities to learn and grow.
So it's not about beating yourself up over mistakes. It's about seeing them as valuable feedback, as stepping stones on the path to mastery.
That's a great way to put it. And finally, AIII highlights something that I think is at the heart of any creative endeavor:
Mm.
Passion.
Passion.
He encourages designers to follow their interest, to align their work with their values, to find that sweet spot where their skills and their passions intersect.
Yeah, because when you're truly passionate about what you do, it shows in your work. It fuels your creativity. It gives you that extra push to keep going, even when things get tough.
And it makes the journey so much more rewarding. Now, having explored all these valuable insights from logo design love, I'd like to leave you with a thought-provoking question
Okay.
from Ari himself. He asks, now that you understand the power of logo design, take a look at your own favorite brands. What
Yeah.
makes their logos work? What stories do they tell?
It's an invitation to look at the world with a more discerning eye, to appreciate the thought and strategy that goes into those seemingly simple designs we encounter every day.
Because every logo has a story to tell. And if you're a designer or aspiring to be one, it's your job to help tell those stories in a way that's visually compelling, strategically found, and built to last.
So it's about more than just creating something that looks good. It's about creating something that has meaning, that resonates with people, that leaves a lasting impression.
And if you're eager to delve deeper into the world of logo design and discover even more about crafting iconic brand identities, I highly recommend checking out David Ari's Logo Design Love. It's a treasure trove of insights and inspiration for anyone interested in this fascinating field.
Awesome. Well, on that note, we'll wrap up this deep dive into logo design love. Thanks for joining us, and until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep designing the human. Welcome to this deep dive. We're going to be looking into branding today.
Yeah.
We encounter brands every day, but have you ever thought about what makes certain brands, like, stand out? You know? Why do some connect while others kind of just fade away? We've got some cool stuff to dig into today.
Yeah.
A book by a branding expert, stories about some pretty iconic brands, and even like this experiment that shows how a simple story can make something seem way more valuable. By the end of this, you'll not only know what branding is, but how it works.
Yeah.
And maybe you'll even find some inspiration for your own ventures.
For sure. So it's interesting that people often picture like cowboys and cattle when they think about branding.
Like the Wild West.
Yeah, the Wild West. You know, searing their mark onto the cattle.
Our notes mention that too, but is that really how it all began?
Well, not exactly. It's kind of more of a popular myth. Branding goes back way further, almost 10,000 years. Imagine ancient Rome. Oil lamp makers used the word fortis on their products. Basically, one of the earliest trademarks.
Wow, so those Roman oil lamp makers were ahead of their time. Were there any other early examples?
Oh yeah, even Egyptian pharaohs. Think about their hieroglyphics. They weren't just marking territory, they were projecting an image of power, like a really early form of personal branding.
It's amazing how this idea of standing out has been around for so long.
Absolutely. But the Industrial Revolution really changed things. Suddenly you had this huge market for goods, and companies needed to differentiate themselves.
Right. It's like the market became this super crowded room, and everyone was trying to shout the loudest.
Exactly. And companies like Kellogg's and Del Monte, they were pioneers in this new world.
And they focused on consistent quality and smart marketing.
Yeah, building that reputation. Essentially, they laid the foundation for how we think about branding today.
It makes you realize that brands give us a sense of trust, especially now when there are so many choices. Can you imagine going to a grocery store with no brands? It'd be totally overwhelming.
That's a great point. It really shows how people buy for more than just practicality. There's something deeper going on.
We found this really interesting quote. Women usually love what they buy, yet hate 2/3 of what is in their closets. What do you think that says about how we think as consumers?
Well, it gets at this idea of consumerism.
Hmm.
What we buy becomes part of who we are. It's not just function, it's about the image we want to project.
Like we're buying into an idea or a lifestyle.
Exactly. And that's where aspirational branding comes in. Think about luxury brands. They sell a feeling of exclusivity.
Even if the product isn't that different from something cheaper.
Right. It's fascinating how brands tap into our desires and aspirations.
It makes you wonder what stories or values really connect with us when we choose certain brands.
That's something worth thinking about because branding at its core is all about storytelling. Have you ever heard of the significant objects experiment?
No, tell me about it.
Okay, so they took these really ordinary things like worthless flea market stuff and created stories around them. Then they sold them on eBay.
So just by adding a story, did these things sell for more?
Oh yeah, way more. Like an average of 2,700% more.
Yeah.
There was this plastic banana, originally bought for 25 cents. It ended up selling for $76.
No way. All because of a story.
Yeah. It shows that a good story can change how we see something, even a simple plastic banana.
That's wild. So it's more than just a logo or a catchy slogan.
Absolutely. It's about making a connection, you know,
Yeah.
revealing the heart of what that product or service is really about.
It's like you're breathing life into it, giving it a personality.
Yeah, and a purpose that people can get behind. Yeah, giving
Oh,
it something people can connect with. But how do you make that story, you know, tangible? How do customers actually experience it?
that's a good question. It's got to be more than just the story
Oh,
itself.
for sure. There's a whole anatomy to a brand. You've got logos, colors, fonts, packaging, even the design of a store. It all plays a part.
Like the Bass Brewery, that red triangle, the first registered trademark in the UK. That simple design, it's become so iconic.
Right. Or the Apple logo. So simple, but so powerful. And think about the Wrigley's spearmint wrapper. That design, it's been basically the same since 1893.
You see it and you know exactly what it is.
Exactly. Brands create this like visual language.
And that's where semiotics comes in, right? How those symbols and signs actually mean something.
Yeah, semiotics is fascinating. Like think about the color red. It can make you feel excited, passionate.
But blue is more calming, trustworthy.
Exactly. Or a bold font, it projects confidence. These choices, they're not random. They're all carefully sought out to shape how people see the brand.
It's like a secret code.
In a way, yeah. But brands are going beyond those static elements too. They're finding new ways to connect with customers.
Like Uniqlo, with their branded apps. They've got everything from a wake-up app to a recipe app.
It's smart. They're not just selling clothes, they're becoming part of their customers' lives.
But is there a point where that becomes too much? Where it feels intrusive instead of helpful?
It's a fine line, for sure. Transparency is key. Customers need to feel like they have control. Uniqlo does a good job. Their apps offer real value.
So for someone just starting their own brand, where do they even begin? There's so much to think about.
There is. But there's a process that can help. It starts with research, really understanding your audience.
Like Lucozade. They were a drink for sick people, and then they became this huge energy drink for athletes.
They saw how things were changing, and they adapted.
So how does a brand find that story, that core message that really resonates?
Collaboration is huge.
Oh,
Bringing in different perspectives can spark some really creative ideas.
our notes mention Johnson Banks, the design firm. They actually had kids help design a typeface for Save the Children.
That's awesome. It shows how fresh perspectives can lead to amazing results.
But building a brand isn't always easy, right? There are going to be challenges along the way.
Of course. And social media is a big one these days. It's an amazing tool for connecting with people, but it can also be risky.
Procter & Gamble, they created this massive online focus group of mothers to get feedback on their products.
That's using social media in a smart way, listening to your customers and adapting to what they need. But you have to be authentic, People can spot a fake a mile away.
So what's the key to building a brand that can really thrive in this digital world?
You have to be agile, willing to experiment and learn and evolve. The brands that will succeed are the ones who listen to their customers, embrace change, and tell stories that really connect.
So as we wrap up this part of our deep dive into branding, what are some of the biggest takeaways you hope our listeners are getting?
Well, I think it's clear that branding is so much more than just a logo or a slogan. It's really about building a connection, understanding your audience, crafting a narrative that resonates with them.
Yeah, it's like building a relationship almost, based on trust and shared values.
Exactly. And like any relationship, it takes work. You have to be honest and willing to adapt.
We've also seen that brand can be really powerful. It can evoke emotions, create communities, even shape our identities.
And with that power comes responsibility. Brands need to be aware of your impact, make choices that align with their values.
We talked about research, collaboration, and agility being important. It's not a one-time thing, it's an ongoing conversation.
Right. And that conversation has to be authentic.
Yeah, people can tell when something's fake.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Consumers want brands that are genuine, relatable, and doing good in the world.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into branding, I have a question for you, the listener. If you were a brand, what story would you tell? What makes you unique?
What would your logo look like? What colors would you use? Those are all interesting things to think about.
Because in a way, we're all branding ourselves every day, right?
Yeah.
Through our actions, our choices.
So take what you've learned from the brands you admire and even the ones that haven't done so well.
And use that to create your own authentic brand, one that reflects who you are and connects with the people you want to reach.
Absolutely.
Thanks for joining us on this exploration of the world of branding.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
We hope you've gained some valuable insights. and that you'll keep exploring the power of branding in your own life. Welcome back, deep divers, ready to explore some more fascinating content. Today, we're diving deep into the world of brand storytelling, specifically with Lawrence Vincent's book, Legendary Brands.
Oh, this could be good.
Yeah, this one really gets into how brands, well, how they weave these narratives that shape our perceptions and influence our choices as consumers.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, you've heard about those Mazda Miata owners who actually marry their cars.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
That's a prime example of that intense connection, right? It goes way beyond simply liking a product.
Right.
It becomes like a shared identity almost.
So, how do brands actually achieve this kind of devotion? It almost feels cult-like, as Vincent kind of suggests in the book.
Well, I wouldn't say it's straight up brainwashing, but it is about understanding the power of narratives.
Right.
Vincent makes a distinction between just, everyday brands and what he calls legendary brands.
Yeah.
Think Harley Davidson, Apple, Starbucks, these brands that tap into something much deeper, connecting with consumers on an almost existential level.
Okay, now I'm really intrigued. What exactly makes these legendary brands so different?
Well, picture it like two tectonic plates colliding. One plate represents those ordinary brands, right? Just that vast landscape.
Okay.
The other plate, a smaller, intensely active zone where these legendary brands operate. They tap into like universal narratives and myths that resonate with our deepest beliefs and values.
So it's not just about like the product itself, it's the whole world that the brand creates around it.
Exactly. Legendary brands project a very specific worldview. They embody values. They tell stories that actually resonate with our personal beliefs. They make us feel like we're part of something bigger than ourselves, something meaningful.
So that's where this whole brand mythology system comes into play, right?
Yes. This four-part cycle that Vincent lays out is key to understanding how legendary brands generate their power.
Okay.
It all starts with these sacred beliefs, which, they aren't necessarily religious in nature. Think of them more as core values that kind of guide our decisions in life.
So like a moral code or a set of principles that people live by.
Right. The book gives this example of Dan Baker, an atheist lawyer.
Okay.
He doesn't believe in God or anything like that, but deeply values hard work and family.
So his sacred beliefs are more about personal principles, not religious doctrine.
Exactly. And what legendary brands do so cleverly is that they connect with those pre-existing beliefs.
Okay.
By aligning themselves with those values, those deeply held principles that people already have, these brands actually become symbols of what we hold dear.
So almost like choosing a certain brand is a way of expressing your own values and beliefs.
You got it. It's about buying into a story, a set of values, a way of seeing yourself in the world.
I see.
And that brings us to the second part of the brand mythology system, the brand agent.
So is that like a celebrity spokesperson or like a mascot for the brand?
It could be, or even the company's founder, like Colonel Sanders for KFC or Steve Jobs for Apple.
Oh, okay.
These agents embody the core story of the brand, making it relatable and trustworthy.
So they're more than just a pretty face. They represent the brand's values in a human way.
Exactly. And that leads us to the narrative itself, the stories the brand tells through, everything from advertising to their packaging to even the customer experience.
Right.
Think about it. This narrative, it goes way beyond just entertaining us.
Right.
It's providing us with frameworks for understanding our own desires and our place in the world. It's tapping into that universal human need for meaning and order.
Wow, this is really starting to click for me now. So by choosing a certain brand, I'm essentially choosing a story to be a part of.
You're catching on quick.
Ah,
And that brings us to the final piece of this puzzle, this brand mythology system, consumer participation.
okay, like those Harley Davidson rallies.
You got it. Or those Apple product launches, right? Those feel more like rock concerts than just product announcements. These brands, they don't just tell stories, they invite us to live them.
Okay, so we've got this overview of how legendary brands work their magic, but how do they actually craft these compelling narratives? Like, what are the storytelling mechanics at play?
Vincent breaks it down, and he starts with the smallest unit, the beat. Think of those classic Absolute vodka ads. Remember those?
Oh, yeah, the ones with the iconic bottle shape and just 2 words.
Exactly. Those are perfect examples of beats. Concise, visually striking, sparking curiosity. Each one kind of poses this dramatic question.
Absolute Miami.
Right. The beats, they create intrigue without revealing the whole story. And then a sequence of beats, well, that builds up to a full-fledged story.
Right.
Which is a 3-part sequence. Situation, complication, resolution. Classic storytelling structure.
Ooh, like that classic Got Milk commercial with Aaron Burr.
Oh, yeah, I remember that one.
First he's munching on a peanut butter sandwich, but then bam, needs milk and he's all out.
Oh, yeah, and then he chokes during the trivia contest.
Exactly. Hilarious resolution, right?
Classic.
It's amazing how a simple story can be so effective.
It's the power of storytelling. It evokes emotions, making the message stick with you,
Right.
long after you've seen that ad.
Okay, now we can't talk about brand storytelling without talking about myths, right?
Right.
Like, what role do myths play in branding?
Well, Vincent makes this distinction between myths and legends.
Okay.
Legends, those are more like rumors or embellished stories.
Right, more like tall tales.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Myths, though, well, those tap into our collective unconscious. They offer this timeless framework for understanding the world.
So myths are more about like universal themes and archetypes that resonate across cultures.
You got it. And legendary brands, they're very good at leveraging these universal myths, connecting with us on a deeper level.
Like Nike's Think Different campaign with all those iconic figures throughout history.
Oh, man, that one gets me every time.
Goosebumps. That wasn't about shoes. It was about connecting Nike to the rebel archetype,
Right.
the one who challenges the status quo.
Challenging the status quo. Yeah, that's a powerful one.
By associating themselves with these historical figures, Nike positioned themselves as, well, the brand for those who dare to dream big.
Totally.
So we're not just passively absorbing these narratives, are we?
Not at all. We actively integrate these brand narratives into our own personal narratives.
Wait, you're saying we all have our own personal brand narratives?
In a way, yeah. It's about consciously or unconsciously shaping our identities through the choices we make,
Right.
like the clothes we wear, the music we listen to, the brands we align with. They all contribute to the story we tell ourselves and the world.
Okay, so you're saying it's about more than just buying a product. It's about buying into an image, a lifestyle, a story.
That's a great way to put it. Think about it like choosing a costume for the role you want to play in the world.
Oh, I like that.
And just like in a movie, the right costume can make you feel more confident, more believable, more in control of your own narrative.
I love that analogy. So if brands are tapping into our personal narratives, how do they actually figure out what stories to tell? How do they know what will resonate with their target audience?
That's where a lot of traditional market research kind of falls short.
Okay.
Vincent, he really advocates for deeper techniques, things like, long interviews.
Long interviews, what are those?
Imagine spending hours with individual consumers,
Mhm.
really digging into their lives, their values, their dreams, their fears.
Whoa, so it's like becoming a therapist for your customer.
It's more like becoming an anthropologist studying a new culture. It's about understanding the deeper motivations behind their choices.
Mm-hmm.
It's about listening, not just asking surface-level questions.
That makes sense. It's about building trust and
Right.
rapport so people feel comfortable opening up.
Exactly. It's about uncovering those aha moments, those little glimpses into the hearts and minds of your customers. And once you've gathered all those insights,
Mm-hmm.
well, then the question becomes, how do you translate them into a cohesive brand strategy?
Yeah, how do you do that?
Vincent suggests creating a brand Bible.
A brand Bible. That sounds pretty intense.
It is. It's more than just a style guide.
So it's like the brand's own personal constitution. It
Mhm.
defines what they stand for and how they operate.
Yeah, it ensures that all their messaging, from advertising to customer service, everything aligns with their core story.
Okay, can you give me like a real world example of how a brand Bible would work?
Sure, take MTV. Their brand Bible would probably identify their, archetypal character as the rebel,
Oh, the rebel, yeah.
always pushing boundaries and challenging the status quo, right?
Yeah, and their genre would be edgy, irreverent, with themes of individuality and self-expression.
Exactly. And their aesthetics would reflect that, bold visuals, music that speaks to youth culture, and so on. So by outlining these elements, the brand Bible kind of ensures that their messaging is consistent across all their platforms.
Okay, so we have this brand Bible as like a roadmap. But how do you actually bring that narrative to life? How do you create a brand experience that feels authentic and engaging?
That's where brand culture comes in. These legendary brands, they don't just have customers, they have like communities, tribes of loyal followers who share their values and beliefs.
It's like creating their own little subculture.
You could say that.
Yeah.
These communities are built through shared rituals, symbols, experiences.
Okay, give me some examples. Like, how do they actually do that?
Okay, take Coca-Cola. They've been so careful about crafting their brand imagery and symbolism over decades. They even limit exposure of their brand to prevent overuse, you know, to prevent loss of impact.
That's interesting. It's like you're treating their brand almost like a sacred object.
Right. And then you have Ben and Jerry's, who hold these annual gatherings for their shareholders that feel more like, festivals than, stuffy corporate events.
That's cool.
These rituals, they strengthen the bond between the brand and its culture.
So it's about creating experiences that bring people together, that make them feel like they're part of something special.
You got it. A strong brand culture is a powerful asset. You could even say that the culture owns the brand. It dictates its success and longevity.
Okay, so we've talked about individual brands creating these cultures. But what about when brands work together? How do they collaborate to tell a more compelling story?
That's where things like co-branding, sponsorship, and partnerships come in. Done right. These collaborations can really extend the reach of a brand's narrative and create these mutually beneficial relationships.
But it's not just about slapping two logos together, right?
Absolutely not. Narrative alignment is crucial. Take, for example, a partnership between Kodak and the Academy Awards.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. They're both associated with capturing memories, preserving special moments.
Right, but when the narratives don't align, it could be a total disaster.
Ooh, can you give me an example of a partnership that didn't quite work out?
The book mentions this kind of awkward partnership between Taco Bell and the Discovery Science Center.
Whoa, really? That's a weird pairing.
It is, and it really highlights the importance of going beyond those surface-level connections. Partnerships need to create systemic value for both brands and their respective cultures.
Yeah, there needs to be a deeper connection than just like, hey, let's put our names together and see what happens.
Exactly.
This has been an incredible deep dive into the world of traditional brand storytelling.
It really has.
But what about creating those immersive narrative experiences in the real world?
That's where nonlinear branding comes in.
Nonlinear branding. Tell me more about that.
It's about engaging all the senses, bringing the brand's story to life in a multidimensional way.
So the ultimate example is Disney theme parks, right?
Absolutely. They're meticulously designed to immerse visitors in specific narratives.
It's like stepping into a movie or a fairy tale.
Exactly. Disney creates a powerful sense of place, a sense of belonging to something truly magical.
The book also mentioned in-Trigger hotels and how they're known for these unique sensory experiences and their focus on creating social spaces.
Yes, they understand that a brand is more than just a logo. It's a feeling, an atmosphere, a way of life.
So nonlinear branding is about creating these touch points that make the brand's story come alive in a tangible way.
Precisely. It's about moving beyond just advertising and marketing and creating this fully immersive narrative world.
Okay, but not every brand can build a theme park, right? What are some smaller scale ways to incorporate these nonlinear branding principles?
Think about the design of retail spaces. Like a store can become a storytelling environment that engages the senses, creates an emotional connection.
Like Abercrombie and Fitch with their dimly lit stores and loud music.
Yeah, exactly. Love it or hate it, they've created a distinct sensory experience tied to their brand.
Or Apple stores with their sleek design and interactive product displays.
Yep. They've created a space that feels more like a playground for tech enthusiasts than a traditional retail store.
So even smaller businesses can use these nonlinear branding principles to create a more engaging experience.
Absolutely. It's about thinking creatively and telling your brand's story through every touch point.
Now, not every brand has a smooth journey. What happens when a brand messes up, when their narrative gets tarnished by a crisis? Can they ever recover?
That's a great question, and one that Vincent addresses head on. He uses the example of Jack in the Box and how they recovered from that E. coli outbreak back in the 90s.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that was a huge scandal. How did they manage to bounce back from something like that?
They leveraged the power of storytelling, turning their mascot, Jack, into this relatable and trustworthy brand agent.
Oh, yeah, I remember those Jack is Back commercials. They were actually pretty funny.
They were. They used humor,
Yeah.
honesty, and they really listened to their customers' concerns to craft this narrative of redemption and renewal.
It's a reminder that even in the face of adversity, a powerful story can really turn things around.
Absolutely. And Jack in the Box's comeback, well, it highlights some key principles for brands facing a crisis. First, acknowledge the problem and take responsibility.
Don't try to sweep it under the rug.
Right. Second, take swift action to address the issue and prevent it from happening again.
Show that you're serious about change.
Exactly. And finally, use storytelling to craft that narrative of redemption and renewal. Turn your brand agent into a hero on a mission to make things right.
Powerful stuff. It's like turning a crisis into an opportunity.
It is. A well-crafted narrative can help a brand not only recover from a setback, but emerge even stronger.
This conversation about brand resurrection, it makes me think about the cyclical nature of brand
Yeah, it's
narratives.
like the hero's journey all over again, right?
Yeah.
There's a rise, a fall, a moment of reckoning, and then that ultimate triumphant return.
And it seems like that cycle is even more accelerated in today's world, with social media and everything moving so fast.
You're right. Brands can rise to fame practically overnight, but they can also fall from grace just as quickly.
So it's more important than ever for brands to be adaptable, to be able to adjust their narratives as needed, and to be resilient when facing those challenges.
And it all starts with building a strong foundation, a core set of values, and a compelling story that can weather any storm.
Now, in the last part of our deep dive, we talked about nonlinear branding and how brands can create these immersive experiences in the real world, like those Disney theme parks.
Right.
What exactly makes Disney's approach so effective? What are they doing that other brands can learn from?
Well, one thing Disney excels at is creating a clear distinction between what Vincent calls sacred and profane space.
Hold on, are we getting religious here?
Not exactly. Think of sacred space as that immersive world that the brand creates, while profane space is just the everyday world that we leave behind when we enter that experience.
So, like when you walk through those gates at Disneyland, you're leaving behind all the stress and worries of the outside world.
Exactly. Disney reinforces that separation through a distinct visual and sensory experience. It really sets the stage for their carefully crafted narrative.
Yeah, it's like stepping into a different dimension, a world of pure imagination.
That's a great way to put it. And then each land within the park contributes to this overarching narrative.
So it's like those different lands are chapters in a larger story.
Precisely. And Disney makes sure that every detail, from the architecture to the music, reinforces the theme and narrative of each land.
They really are masters at creating these cohesive and immersive experiences.
They are. And another key element is their focus on sensory engagement. They engage all five senses to create these truly memorable experiences.
I'll never forget the smell of popcorn on Main Street, USA, or the feeling of the cobblestones beneath my feet.
It's all part of their carefully orchestrated sensory symphony. And they don't just bombard you with random sensations either. They use those sensory details to tell a story, to guide you on a journey through their world.
They also do a great job of creating those narrative pathways that lead visitors through a specific sequence of experiences, right?
Yes, it's like they're leading you on a treasure hunt, revealing different aspects of the brand's story along the way.
And then there's that iconic Sleeping Beauty's castle at the end of Main Street, USA, which kind of serves as a visual anchor for the whole park.
It gives visitors that sense of place, of orientation in such a large and complex environment.
Right. And of course, we can't forget about the cast members who are such a vital part of the Disney experience.
Oh, absolutely. They're more than just employees. They're performers, storytellers, ambassadors for the brand.
They always seem so genuinely happy and engaged, which really adds to the magic.
Well, Disney invests heavily in training their cast members, to embody the brand's values and interact with guests in a way that really reinforces the whole narrative.
So Disney definitely sets a high bar for nonlinear branding. But are these principles applicable to, other brands, those that maybe don't have the resources of a Disney?
Of course. The key is to think creatively and find ways to translate these principles to your own brand and audience.
Okay, so what are some examples of that? Like, how could a smaller brand apply these concepts?
Well, think about a retail store. They can use lighting, music, even scent to create a more immersive and memorable experience.
Like how Abercrombie and Fitch uses dim lighting, loud music, and those strong scents to create that distinct atmosphere.
Exactly. Or think about Apple stores, with their minimalist design and hands-on product displays. They create a sense of playfulness and discovery.
Right. So even on a smaller scale, brands can use these nonlinear branding principles to tell their story in a more engaging way.
Absolutely. It's about thinking outside the traditional marketing box and finding those unique touch points that will resonate with your target audience.
This has been an incredible deep dive into brand storytelling, and we've covered a lot of ground. What are some key takeaways you hope our listeners will walk away with today?
I hope they'll start paying closer attention to the stories that brands are telling. To question those narratives and make more conscious choices about the brands they allow into their lives.
It's about becoming more active participants in this whole process, not just passive consumers.
Exactly. And, I also hope they'll be inspired to think about their own personal narratives, the stories that they're telling themselves, and the world.
That's a powerful thought. It reminds us that we're not just consumers of stories, but active creators of our own narratives.
And that the brands we choose, well, they're the tools we use to tell those stories.
Absolutely. That's a great note to end on. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into legendary brands, and we hope you've enjoyed the journey and learned some valuable insights along the way.
It's been a pleasure sharing these ideas with you.
And remember, the power of narrative is in your hands. Choose your stories wisely.
Choose wisely. You know, one thing that really struck me in legendary brands was this idea that every consumer is essentially an actor, right? Like we're all performing a role in our own life movie.
Oh, interesting. So you're saying we're not really being our true selves, we're just playing a part.
Not necessarily. It's more about how we consciously or maybe unconsciously shape our own identities, right?
Yeah.
Through the choices we make every day.
Right.
The clothes we wear, the music we listen to, the brands we align ourselves with, they all contribute to this story we tell ourselves and the world.
Okay, I see where you're going with this. So, how do these legendary brands fit into our personal narratives?
Well, they can act as plot activators, they can be characters, or even aesthetic elements in our life movies.
You break that down for me.
Okay, so imagine like how a brand like Harley Davidson can influence your personal plot, right?
Hmm.
Owning a Harley, it's not just about transportation.
Right.
It's a statement. It can literally change how you interact with the world and how people perceive you.
So it's about more than just the product. It's about buying into an image, a lifestyle.
Exactly. Like choosing a costume for the role you want to play.
Mm.
And just like in a movie, the right costume can make you feel more confident, more believable, more in control of your own narrative, you know?
I like that analogy. What about brands as characters, though? How does that work?
Think about those brands that have like a really strong personality, a distinct voice, right? Almost like they become part of your inner circle, influencing your decisions, even your values.
Okay, yeah.
The book uses Mountain Dew as an example. It's very embedded in this like edge culture.
Yeah, their ads are all about pushing limits and defying expectations.
Right. So for a young skateboarder, you know, who's about to drop into a half pipe, Mountain Dew can almost become a character in their own personal narrative.
Interesting.
It's the voice that encourages them to take the risk, to push beyond their comfort zone.
It's like the brand becomes their hype man, their inner cheerleader, right?
Exactly. Brands can become part of our emotional landscape, you know, influencing our choices and shaping our experiences.
Okay, I see that. Now, what about this aesthetic element idea? What do you mean by that?
Well, think about brands like Apple or Starbucks. Their products, their stores, their packaging, it all kind of contributes to a cohesive brand identity and aesthetic, right? When you buying into those brands, you're kind of buying into a way of seeing the world.
It's like choosing a filter for your life, right? Like Apple is sleek minimalism, and Starbucks has that warm, inviting coffee house vibe.
You got it. And just like a filter can enhance a photo, the right brand aesthetic can enhance your own personal narrative,
Hmm.
make it feel more aligned with your own sense of self.
This is all very insightful, but it also raises some concerns, right? Like, if we're so easily influenced by these brand stories, aren't we super vulnerable to manipulation?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's where those ethical considerations around brand storytelling become super important.
Yeah, for sure.
Because if brands truly understand these, like, deep psychological triggers, they could definitely exploit them for their own gain.
Right, right.
So it's crucial for us as consumers to be aware of these dynamics. You know,
Okay.
we need to be critical thinkers. We need to question the stories that brands are selling and make sure they align with our own values.
So we need to develop a kind of brand BS detector. Huh? I love that. We need to see through the marketing hype and identify those brands that are more interested in exploiting our vulnerabilities than genuinely connecting with us.
So it's about finding those brands that resonate with us on a deeper level, you know,
Mhm.
the ones that genuinely reflect our own values.
Exactly. And it's about being mindful of the role that brands actually play in our lives, you
Yeah.
know, making sure that we're the ones writing our own stories, not letting brands kind of dictate our choices and define who we are.
Right. This whole life movie analogy,
Mm.
it makes me think about those people who seem to have like the perfectly curated brand identity.
Ah, the influencers.
Yes. You know, those Instagram feeds that are flawlessly styled and it's like their whole lives play out like a perfectly scripted movie. Are they even real?
That's a tough one. I think it's a spectrum, you know. Some people are genuinely passionate about certain brands and lifestyles.
Okay.
Others are more calculated. They're using their online persona for, you know, self-promotion and profit.
So how can we tell the difference? How do we know who's being real and who's just playing a role?
Hmm.
It comes down to intuition, you know,
Yeah.
and paying attention to the details.
Okay.
Look for those moments of vulnerability, those imperfections, those genuine human connections. Those are the signs that someone is being real, that they're not just selling a perfectly curated image.
So it's like the difference between a staged photo and a candid snapshot, right? The staged photo might be technically perfect, but the candid one, well, that captures something real, something authentic.
Exactly. And maybe the key is to not get too caught up in those, perfectly curated brand identities that we see online.
Hmm.
Remember that everyone, even those influencers, is just trying to figure things out, trying to tell their own story.
Right. We should be wary of those picture perfect lives we see on social media. They're often just carefully constructed narratives,
Hmm.
and designed to sell us something.
Right. We need to be more discerning consumers of those online narratives and focus on building genuine connections in our own lives.
Okay, so we've mainly focused on how brands influence consumers through their storytelling. But what about the power that consumers have to shape brand narratives, right? It's not just a one-way street.
That's a crucial point. And consumers, especially in today's digital age, well, they have more power than ever before to influence those brand stories.
You mean through things like social media, online reviews, and just general word of mouth?
Exactly. Brands aren't in complete control of their narratives anymore. They need to be listening to their consumers, responding to feedback, even co-creating stories with them.
So the old marketing model of pushing messages out to a passive audience, that's not really effective anymore.
It's becoming less and less effective, yeah.
Yeah.
Brands need to be pulling consumers in, engaging in a dialogue, building relationships based on trust and mutual respect.
So it's a two-way street now, right? Brands influence consumers, but consumers also have the power to influence brands.
That's the reality of the marketing landscape today. And the brands that are really successful are embracing that collaboration. They're not afraid to give up a little bit of control and let consumers become part of the storytelling process.
Makes sense. A brand story is only as powerful as the people who believe in it and share it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
A brand story isn't created in a vacuum, right? It's co-created with their community.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about storytelling in the digital realm, but what about the physical world? How can brands create those immersive experiences that really bring their stories to life?
That's where experiential marketing comes in.
Experiential marketing.
Yeah, it's about creating events, activations, environments that really engage all the senses and allow consumers to step into the brand's world.
Like pop-up shops and brand activations, that
Yeah,
kind of thing.
done right. Those
Yeah.
experiences can be so powerful. They allow people to interact with the brand on a personal level, create memories, and really become part of the story.
What are some brands that are doing experiential marketing really well?
Red Bull's a great example.
Red Bull, yeah.
They've built their whole brand around this concept of experience,
Hmm.
right? They sponsor extreme sporting events. They create interactive installations. They even host their own music festival.
Wow, so it's like they've created a whole lifestyle, not just an energy drink.
Exactly. They understand that consumers, especially younger generations, are craving experiences, not just products.
Right,
And
right.
it doesn't have to be just these big, over-the-top events either. Even smaller scale experiences can be super effective.
Okay, like what's a good example of that?
Well, think about those craft breweries,
Mm.
the ones offering tours, letting customers see how the beer is made, sample different varieties.
Yeah, I love those. It feels so much more personal and authentic.
Exactly. It's about inviting people behind the scenes, showing them the human side of the brand, and really giving them a story to tell.
So it's about thinking outside the traditional marketing box. Finding those creative ways to bring the brand's story to life in the real world.
You're absolutely right.
Okay, we've talked a lot about the positives of brand storytelling,
Yeah.
but are there any potential downsides? Can brands take this storytelling thing too far?
There are definitely some pitfalls to watch out for. Inauthenticity is a big one.
Inauthenticity, okay.
Yeah. When brands try too hard to be something they're not, it can come off as really forced and inauthentic.
Right, like those brands trying to jump on the latest trend and it just feels super awkward.
Exactly. Consumers can spot a phony a mile away,
Yeah.
you know. Authenticity is key. Brands have got to be true to themselves, to their values, and to their stories.
Another pitfall could be like oversaturation. When brands are constantly bombarding us with messages, it can just feel overwhelming, right?
Oh, absolutely. Less is more. Definitely applies to brand storytelling. Sometimes the most powerful stories are told subtly, with restraint.
So it's about finding that balance between, being present but not being pushy.
Precisely. And another concern is the potential for manipulation, right? Brands that really understand the power of storytelling can use it to influence our choices, and sometimes in ways that aren't in our best interests.
Right.
We need to be aware of that persuasive power,
Yeah.
right? We need to be careful we're not being manipulated into buying things we don't need or supporting brands that don't align with their values.
Yeah, that makes sense. We need to develop that brand immunity, like you were saying earlier.
Exactly. We need to be those critical thinkers, always questioning the stories that brands are selling us and making sure those stories align with our own values.
This brings us to a bigger question, I think. How is this rise of brand storytelling changing, the way we interact with the world, with each other, with ourselves?
That's a big one. I think we're still kind of in the early stages of understanding the full impact of brand storytelling on our culture.
Right.
But it's clear that brands are becoming way more than just products or services.
Yeah.
They're becoming cultural forces, shaping our values, even our identities.
Right. It's pretty profound when you think about it.
It is, and that raises questions about the role of brands in society.
Like, what are their responsibilities? How do we ensure that this storytelling power is used ethically?
Right. And how can we, as consumers, become more aware of the influence that these narratives have on our lives?
Those are big questions.
They are, but they're important to think about. The power of storytelling is real, and it's shaping the world around us in some pretty profound ways.
Absolutely. This has been an incredible exploration of brand storytelling. But it's not just about brands trying to sell us stuff, right? It's about the stories we tell ourselves, the roles we play in the world, the choices we make every
You
day.
said it. It's about recognizing the power of narrative in shaping our lives and the world around us.
And understanding that we all have a role to play in this story, both as consumers and as creators, right?
Absolutely. Before we move on, though, I want to touch on another concept that Vincent explores, nonlinear branding.
Oh, yeah, nonlinear branding. That's where brands create those immersive experiences in the real world, right?
Exactly. And the book kind of uses Disney theme parks as the gold standard.
Oh, for sure. Those Disney parks are masterfully designed. They really transport you to another world.
They do. Every detail, from the architecture to the music, it all contributes to this seamless story experience.
It's like you're stepping into a movie.
Exactly. And it creates this powerful sense of place, like a sense of belonging to something truly magical.
Right. And the book also mentions those Ian Schrager hotels, how they're known for their unique sensory experiences and how they really focus on creating those social spaces.
Yeah, they get it. They understand that a brand is more than just a logo. It's a feeling, an atmosphere, a way of life.
So nonlinear branding is about bringing that brand story to life in a really tangible, memorable way.
Precisely. It's about moving beyond traditional advertising and creating a truly immersive experience.
Okay, but not every brand has the resources to create a theme park, right?
Mhm.
How can brands incorporate those principles on, a smaller scale?
Well, you can think about how retail spaces are designed,
Yeah.
to create that more immersive experience, like lighting, music, even scent can be used to evoke a specific mood or feeling.
Like those dimly lit Abercrombie and Fitch stores.
Exactly. Love it or hate it, they've created a distinct sensory experience tied to their brand identity.
Or Apple stores, which feel more like playgrounds for tech enthusiasts than traditional stores.
Another great example. They've really nailed that sense of playfulness and discovery.
So even on a smaller scale, brands can use these nonlinear branding principles to, really tell their story in a
Yeah.
more engaging way.
Absolutely. It's about thinking outside the traditional marketing box and finding those unique touch points that are going to resonate with your target audience.
Okay, so we've established that those Disney parks are kind of the gold standard for this nonlinear branding thing.
Oh, yeah, they've got it down to a science.
What makes their approach so effective? What are some key elements that other brands can learn from?
Well, one thing that Disney does really well is creating a clear separation between what Vincent calls sacred and profane space.
Wait, hold on. Are we talking about religion now?
Not quite. In this context, sacred space refers to that immersive world that the brand creates,
Okay.
and then profane space is just the everyday world we kind of leave behind when we enter that experience.
So, like when you walk through the gates at Disneyland, you're leaving behind the stress and worries of everyday life.
Exactly. And Disney reinforces that separation with those distinct visuals and sensory experiences, right?
Yeah.
It sets the stage for those carefully crafted narratives.
Yeah. I've always loved how Main Street USA feels like you've stepped back in time to this simpler era.
That's the magic of Disney, right?
Yeah.
They create these carefully crafted illusions that really transport you to a whole different world.
And each land within the park has its own theme and narrative, too.
Yes. Each land is like a chapter in a larger story.
Hmm.
As you move through the park, you're actually on this carefully orchestrated narrative journey.
It's not just a collection of random rides, right? It's all about creating a cohesive experience.
Exactly. Disney pays incredible attention to detail, making sure that every element contributes to that overarching narrative.
Okay, what other principles of nonlinear branding are they using in those parks?
Well, sensory engagement is huge. Disney parks are a feast for the senses, right? Sights, sounds, smells, even tactile experiences, they all bring the brand's story to life.
Oh, I know what you mean. That smell of popcorn on Main Street, USA gets me every time.
It's all part of the experience. The sound of the marching band, the feel of the cobblestones, the taste of a Dole Whip, all those sensory details just make for a much more immersive experience.
And they also do a great job of creating those, narrative pathways, right, that guide you through the park.
You're right. It's like they're leading you on a treasure hunt, revealing different aspects of the brand story along the way.
And they always have that clear center, like Sleeping Beauty's castle, that gives you a sense of place and direction.
Yeah, that's important in such a large and complex environment. Gives you a place to orient yourself.
We can't forget about those cast members either. They play such a huge role in bringing the Disney story to life.
Oh, totally. They're more than just employees. They're performers, storytellers, ambassadors for the brand.
Yeah, I agree. They always seem so friendly and helpful, and it's like they genuinely embody the Disney spirit.
That's a testament to their training and their commitment to making those employees part of the brand's narrative.
So Disney is clearly the master of this nonlinear branding thing. But can other brands apply those principles without having Disney's massive resources?
Of course. The key is to think creatively. A retail store, for example, can be designed to create a more immersive experience using lighting, music, scent.
Like those dimly lit Abercrombie and Fitch stores.
Exactly. Or Apple stores, which feel more like playgrounds for tech enthusiasts.
Right. So even on a smaller scale, brands can use nonlinear branding to create a more holistic and engaging experience.
Absolutely. It's about thinking outside that traditional marketing box and finding creative ways to tell your brand story.
Okay, this has been an awesome exploration of nonlinear branding. So Disney excels at creating a clear separation between the everyday world and the immersive brand world.
Yes, and they use a variety of techniques to create a cohesive narrative experience.
Right. And even though Disney is, the gold standard, these principles are applicable to any brand, no matter how big or small.
Absolutely. The key is to be creative and find ways to adapt those principles to your own brand and audience.
This has been an incredible deep dive into brand storytelling. We've covered so much ground. What are some key takeaways that you hope our listeners will walk away with today?
Well, I hope they'll start paying closer attention to the stories that brands are telling. Question those narratives and make more conscious choices about the brands they allow into their lives.
It's about becoming active participants in the brand storytelling process, not just passive consumers, right?
Exactly. And I also hope they'll think about their own personal narratives.
Mm.
What brands are they using to tell their stories? Are those the stories they want to be telling?
That's such a powerful question. It reminds us that we have the power to choose the stories we live by.
And that's the ultimate message here, right? We're not just consumers, we're storytellers. And the brands we choose are the tools we use to tell those stories.
This has been an amazing journey, but we've only just scratched the surface. There's still so much more to explore.
We've got plenty more to uncover.
Stay tuned for the final part of our deep dive, where we'll be talking about brand resurrection.
Yes. We'll explore how brands can use storytelling to overcome those challenges and rebuild trust, especially after a crisis.
And we'll delve even deeper into the world of nonlinear branding, using those fascinating Disney examples as a case study.
Get ready for more mind-blowing insights. Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We're wrapping up our exploration of legendary brands, and today we're going to tackle a really interesting concept, brand resurrection. Oh yeah, this is a good one. How brands can bounce back from even the toughest challenges.
Right. Like we talked about the Jack in the Box E. coli outbreak earlier. But I'm curious to go a bit deeper into the mechanics of their comeback. How did they not only survive that, but come back even stronger?
Well, they really tapped into the power of storytelling. Remember that whole hero's journey we talked about?
Yeah, I remember.
They basically took their mascot, Jack, and transformed him into, like, this relatable leader who was committed to change, decisive leader.
Yeah, it's like they took this goofy mascot and gave him a whole new level of depth. It was really clever.
Right, and they didn't shy away from the crisis at all. They acknowledged the problem head on, took responsibility, and laid out a clear path forward.
Yeah, I remember those commercials where Jack was blowing up the old Jack in the Box boardroom. It was funny, but it also showed they were serious about making changes.
Exactly. That's the brilliance of using those dramatic hilarities.
Yeah.
They created the stark contrast between the old Jack in the Box and the new reformed version, signaling a genuine shift in values.
And they didn't just talk about change, they actually made real changes to their food safety practices. And they really listened to what their customers were saying.
Right. They knew that rebuilding trust takes more than just words. It requires action.
It's really amazing how Jack in the Box not only recovered, but they actually became even more popular than they were before the crisis.
It really is. It shows how powerful storytelling can be, not just to, like, repair a damaged reputation, but to actually elevate a brand.
Totally. So, for other brands facing a crisis, what are some key takeaways from the Jack in the Box story?
Well, first and foremost, acknowledge the problem, take responsibility. Don't try to downplay the situation or hide from it.
Transparency is key.
Absolutely. Second,
Mm.
take swift action to address the issue and make sure it doesn't happen again. You got to show your audience you're serious.
Show them you're committed to making things right.
Exactly. And then use storytelling to create that narrative of redemption and renewal.
Mm.
Turn your brand agent into a hero on a mission to make amends.
Right. And don't forget to really listen to your customers, bring them into the conversation.
Oh, for sure. Show them that you value their input and that you're committed to earning back their trust. It's a powerful way to turn a crisis into an opportunity.
It really is. This whole conversation about brand resurrection, it makes me think about how brand narratives are kind of cyclical, you know?
Yeah, it's like that hero's journey all over again, right? There's a rise, a fall, a moment of reckoning, and then that ultimate triumphant return.
And that cycle seems even faster in today's world with social media and everything moving at warp speed.
Oh, definitely. Brands can become super popular overnight, but they can also fall from grace just as quickly.
So more than ever, brands need to be adaptable and resilient, ready to adjust their narratives when needed.
And it all starts with a strong foundation, a clear set of values and a compelling story that can withstand those inevitable challenges.
Solid advice. Now, we were talking about nonlinear branding earlier and how brands can create those immersive experiences, like Disney.
Ah, yes, the masters of experience.
What are some of the things Disney does so well that other brands can learn from?
Well, Disney excels at creating this really clear separation between, as Vincent calls it, sacred and profane space.
Hold on, are we talking about religion again?
Huh. Not in the traditional sense.
Mm.
Sacred space in this context refers to that immersive world that the brand creates.
Okay,
And then profane space. That's just the ordinary world we leave behind when we enter the experience.
got it. So it's like when you step through those gates at Disneyland, you're leaving behind the stress of everyday life.
Precisely. And Disney reinforces that separation through these very distinct visuals and sensory experiences, which really sets the stage for their narratives.
It's so effective. I mean, you really feel like you've entered a completely different world.
That's the goal. And then each land within the park, it contributes to that overarching narrative.
Like chapters in a book.
Exactly. And Disney ensures that every detail, from the architecture to the music, supports the theme of that land.
Right.
They're
Right.
masters of creating these cohesive, immersive experiences. Another key element is their focus on sensory engagement.
Engaging all the senses.
Yes,
Hmm.
they really use sights, sounds, smells, even tactile experiences to bring the brand story to life.
It's true. That smell of popcorn on Main Street, USA, it just brings back so many memories.
It's all carefully designed.
Mhm.
The sounds of the marching band, the feel of the cobblestones, even the taste of a Dole Whip, those sensory details add to the experience.
They also do a fantastic job with those, what did we call them? Those narrative pathways, right?
Yes, the pathways that lead visitors through the park in a specific sequence.
It's like they're guiding you through a story, revealing different aspects of the brand along the way.
Exactly. And they always have that clear center, too, like Sleeping Beauty's castle, giving you that sense of place and direction.
And of course, we can't forget about the cast members who are such an integral part of the Disney experience.
Oh, for sure. They're like performers, storytellers, they're brand ambassadors.
They always seem genuinely happy and engaged, and it really adds to the magic.
Disney really invests in training them, making sure they understand and embody the brand's values.
So we've talked a lot about Disney, but what about other brands? Those that might not have Disney's massive budget. Can they use these nonlinear branding techniques?
Absolutely. The key is to get creative. You know, like a retail store could use lighting, music, scent to create a more immersive environment.
Like how those Abercrombie and Fitch stores use dim lighting, loud music, and those strong scents to create that, very particular atmosphere.
Exactly. Or think about Apple stores, how they feel more like playgrounds than traditional stores.
Yeah, that minimalist design, those hands-on displays, it really encourages you to explore and interact.
Right. So even on a smaller scale, brands can use these principles to create a more engaging brand experience.
It's about finding those touch points that will resonate with your specific audience.
That's what it's all about.
Well, this has been a truly incredible deep dive into legendary brands. We've talked about the power of narrative, the importance of authenticity, the rise of brand culture, the ethics of storytelling, and even how brands can create those immersive experiences in the real world. What are some final thoughts you'd like to leave our listeners with today?
I hope they walk away from this with a deeper understanding of just how powerful storytelling is, not just for brands, but for all of us.
It's about being aware of the narratives that are shaping our world, our perceptions, and ultimately our choices.
Yes. And I also hope they'll be inspired to really think about their own personal narratives. What stories are they telling? And are those the stories they want to be telling?
That's a great question to ponder. It reminds us that we all have the power to choose the stories we live by.
And that's what I really hope people take away from this conversation. We're not just passive consumers of stories, we're active creators.
We have the power to shape our own narratives, and the brands we choose are part of that process.
Absolutely. That's a great way to put it.
Well, this has been a fantastic journey, and thanks for joining us on this deep dive into legendary brands. We hope you've enjoyed it and learned a thing or two along the way.
It's been a pleasure.
And remember, the power of narrative is in your hands. Choose your stories wisely.